In this video, we want to talk about innovation theories. In particular, we want to identify one particular theory, the Henderson Clarke Model. Now, this is very useful as a means of classifying innovation. And we'll see later on that there are 4 different types we can identify from this model. And that's useful because later, and perhaps in a different context, when you meet innovation in your studies or in your readings, you're able to classify it as a particular type of innovation. And this all harks back to this particular model. The model itself is specified in this way. It looks obscure as it stands, but if we just realize here that the word architectural relates to the processes within the business, the knowledge of the business, the detailed knowledge to make the product, the routines of the manufacturing process, the way in which products are developed and manufactured or brought into existence. Or indeed, it could be that it is a service, and the architectural knowledge in that case is a knowledge of the routines that are required in order to deliver that service. So it's an overarching concept, this architectural knowledge. It cuts across the whole product or the whole service and what's needed in order to deliver that product or that service. So in the case of the diagram, the top center is high impact on architectural knowledge. It's got a high impact, whatever the type of innovation is, on that particular aspect. In other words, it impinges on the knowledge base of the organization. It impinges on the way in which the product is designed, delivered, thought about, manufactured, or if it's a service, the way it's delivered, as I said, in the marketplace. So that's what we mean by high impact. It looks at the architectural knowledge. The low impact one simply means that there's a type of innovation that doesn't impact a lot on the processes of the business. It doesn't impact a lot on the way the business goes about its daily tasks. It may not be lead to radical change of the product, but it means that the overall product remains essentially the same. However, if you look to the left and the right, we've got component knowledge. The components within the product may change or be altered. The way the product fits together, the various components. Or if it's a service, the way in which the service is delivered may change. That could be a change in the component. Perhaps there's been a change in technology. In the past, information was delivered, just for argument's sake, let's say it was delivered by email, but now it may be delivered by a conference facility. It's a component of the delivery. The message is the important part in that case, and how it's delivered is the component. If it's a product, it could be some part of the product, which is a component of the product, and that may change it. It may be changed, I should say. So we have these 2 concepts, the architectural and the component. The architectural, as I said, takes the overall design and the overall knowledge to make that particular product. Not just the tools and the equipment and the competencies of the workforce, but the knowledge incorporated in the product. That's what we mean by the architectural knowledge. The component will be the individual components within the product. So we have low impact component knowledge and high impact component knowledge. Now, if we fit in 4 classifications here, we've got architectural, radical, modular, and incremental innovation. So we have 4 different types of innovation that can be identified through this model. That's why the Henderson Clarke model is a useful model. We can now look at innovations and classify them as architectural, or radical, or incremental, or modular. We can decide between them. What type of innovation is it? So it gives us a better understanding of innovation, but also it means that we're able to communicate more effectively. The discussion is about a particular type of innovation. We could say the discussion is about radical innovation. What do we mean by radical innovation? Well, if we go back to the Henderson and Clarke model, that's what we mean. It fits there. It's high impact architectural, high impact component. That's radical. If it's high impact architectural and low impact component, that's architectural innovation, because the component hasn't really changed. If it's high impact, if it's low impact architectural and low impact component, then it's incremental. It's just creeping along. It's changing gradually. So let's talk about the model itself. Well, it was proposed in 1990 by Henderson and Clarke. The model identifies the different approaches and situations that impact on a company's need to innovate. So it identifies why companies need to innovate. Generally speaking, the need to innovate is market driven. Companies don't want to be left behind. They don't want to watch other competitors steal a leap on them, to get ahead of them in the market. They don't want to watch the competitors innovate, change their product, become more fashionable, be able to charge a premium for their product. Their product is more in demand because they've innovated it. So companies tend to follow each other and try to jump ahead of each other. So there's this constant race to be in the front and to have the best product in the market. And of course, that's to the advantage of the customers. That's the advantage of the system. As I said, the model describes 4 innovation typologies. The typologies are architectural, radical, modular, and incremental. And these 4 typologies is what we're going to look at. So it looks at technological knowledge. Architectural knowledge first. Well, that's the extent to which knowledge required to revamp the overall product and its design. This type of knowledge is embedded in the organizations. So architectural knowledge is the extent to which knowledge is required in order to radically change a product. It means looking at all the aspects, looking at the components, looking at the product, looking at the machinery, looking at the workforce, looking at the competencies, looking at everything that needs to be done. That's architectural. It's all embracive. And as long as the product is being produced, we could say that that knowledge, the architectural knowledge, is embedded within the organizations. So that's what we mean by architectural knowledge. Component knowledge, well, it's the extent to which knowledge required to make changes to components or parts of the product. So component knowledge is essentially leaving the product as it is, but making some changes to the components. Let's say a car manufacturer, they produce a particular model of car. That's architectural. They've got everything there. They have the know-how to make the car. They have the equipment, the skills, the competencies, the parts. It's designed, it works. But now they may want to change some aspect of it. They might want to change the heating system. That's a component. That's component knowledge. So if you like, the architectural knowledge is, to some extent, the summation of all the component knowledge that builds the product. The model demonstrates the extent to which innovation occurs and its impact on the product design or development. So it looks at the extent of the changes. And if we look on the main part of the slide here, the bottom part on the right hand side, it says architectural knowledge plus component knowledge equals technological knowledge. So what it's done here is it's taken technological knowledge and broke it into two parts: architectural, the overall product, the overall knowledge necessary to make that product, and the component knowledge, the knowledge of the components that go into the product. And when you put the two of those together, you get technological knowledge. So two key elements in the model: architectural and component knowledge. So let's bear those in mind. Worth making a note of these and making your own notes from this one. At the end of this, as I said before, we need to be able to classify innovations as architectural or radical or modular or incremental. So we need to know what these are. What are the attributes of these different types of innovation? So let's look at incremental. Well, incremental is it's low impact component. It's incremental, just gradual changes. So some of the components are changed. It's not an overhaul of the product. This is just some part of it is changed. And also it's low impact on the architectural knowledge. So it means some changes to the knowledge of the product, but it's not a lot. It's knowledge of some particular component, and the overall knowledge of the product will be amended to include this, but the majority of the knowledge related to the product remains the same. There's just this incremental change, this small change, because some of the components have been changed. This innovation case involves making small changes that build on the existing product. So the existing product broadly remains intact, but some of the components are changed. But it's still the same product. So the architectural issue remains intact. The component part has changed. So it's incremental, it's small changes. It requires low knowledge in component and architectural, as it is an existing product design. The design of the product hasn't changed. It's been tweaked. Gradual changes have been introduced, small changes have been introduced, new components have been added or improved. But overall, the product looks the same, has the same feel, except it's got this extra small dimension. It's an incremental improvement. Previously, the product could do something. Now it can do something plus a little bit more. It's been improved in some way by some small amount. So it's incremental. The example I've got here is the iPhone upgrade, gradual improvement as technology progresses. So we get this with Microsoft and with Apple and with a lot of the becomes with Google. We get a product, and as consumers we're perhaps quite happy with the product, but later on we get an upgrade. So for example, Windows 10 gets regular updates from Microsoft. They'll update different components within the system. They'll update drivers, make the system more secure and more robust, and fix problems and fix errors. So do Apple, and so do Microsoft, so do Google. So a lot of them give us these updates, but the product itself essentially remains the same. So Windows 10 remains Windows 10. We just get an upgrade. So it's incremental. It's an improvement. Sometimes it's a small improvement. Sometimes Microsoft say there's going to be a big upgrade. that we might see as changing the product significantly in some way. So that might have a bigger impact. That might be a modular improvement if we look at the diagram here, or even a radical innovation, which is changing the look of, say, Windows 10 completely and giving it extra functionality. That would be a radical change, a radical innovation. Modular innovation, well, low impact on architectural knowledge. So back to the iPhone for a second. The iPhone remains an iPhone, but we might want to add a new battery, a new component. The battery itself might have been improved. So that's high impact on the component knowledge, but low impact on architectural. It still is an iPhone. So the architectural knowledge remains the same. Still has the same functionality. It still does the same things. Just one of the components has been improved. So it's modular innovation. The overall system hasn't been changed. Change to one or more of the product components. This has been modular. So the product has been improved. It's got more functionality. This requires high component knowledge and low architectural knowledge. Sorry, Siri was determined to get in on the act. So what we've got here is modular innovation. And modular innovation is just the next step up, I should say, or maybe up or down, from incremental innovation. What it means is simply the product remains the same, the architecture remains the same, except it's now got additional features. So a new battery replacement for an iPhone, the example we've got in the picture. Now, architectural innovation. Well, architectural innovation is low impact on the component knowledge, but high impact on architectural knowledge. This is architectural innovation. Sometimes companies are able to use existing knowledge for components, but configure the components in a different way. They're able to join the components together in a different way, and that would be high architectural knowledge. They're able to use the components in a almost a totally different way. So it's architectural innovation. It's the product is changed. It looks different, has a different feel. It has it's different. It involves the complete change of the product architecture, but the core product concept and design remains the same. The example I've got here on the screen is two telephones, an old-fashioned telephone and a smartphone on the right-hand side. Well, there's been a radical difference. I won't say radical innovation because it's the next one along, but a radical difference in design. There's an architectural difference in design. They look different. And yet, in the early stages, the components on the left, the old phone and the new phone, a lot of the components may have been similar. They were put together differently. So it's architectural innovation. Requires high architectural knowledge as it's a new product design, but low component knowledge as product processes are the same. So with the telephone example, the telephone on the left makes phone calls, the telephone on the right makes phone calls, but gradually the one on the right becomes different. Gradually more functionality is added, until eventually the two products are very different. They have a lot more differences in terms of components, and they will have differences in terms of design. And that's the example we've got, the telecommunications industry. Now, radical innovation. Well, this is high impact component knowledge and high impact architectural knowledge. This means the components are radically different, are very different, and the architecture is different as well. Well, we know that Google, for example, sell glasses that it's possible to connect to the internet and surf the net whilst at the same time using them as glasses. Well, in the past we would use a PC, or we'd use an Apple, an iMac or whatever to surf the net. So here we can see the components are totally different, but the architecture is totally different as well. And that's radical innovation. That is fundamental innovation. That's different. So it requires new thinking. It's a paradigm shift, we call it. Paradigm shift means a big shift, almost a total shift from one to the other. Product development which revolutionizes the industry or develops new industries. So this is a big change. Requires both high component and architectural knowledge. For example, Apple iMacs to iPhones and their move to artificial intelligence technologies. So what we've got in the Henderson Clarke model are these four typologies: radical innovation, big change between the design of the product and the components. So architectural and components are different. Oddly enough, they may be doing the same job. They still may be surfing the net, as in the example we've got on the screen here. The computer on the bottom is accessing the net, let's say, but the person on the right wearing the glasses is also accessing the net. They're doing the same job, but they are totally different. That's radical innovation. Architectural innovation, the components are essentially the same, it just the product looks different, has a different feel and a slightly different capacity, perhaps. Modular means you've got low impact on the architectural, but high impact on components. Modular means the existing product remains essentially the same. It looks and feels the same, but it's got more functionality, more facilities incorporated in the product. And incremental, it's when it's got almost no change in the architecture or no change whatever, and very little change on the component. Sometimes perhaps there might be an update. That's incremental change. And that takes us through this Henderson Clarke model, which essentially, what you need to know is the difference between radical, architectural, incremental and modular innovation. And that's the explanation for their meanings. And you will hear these terms bandied about when we discuss innovation in other situations. So well worth knowing what they are. Having said that, let's leave it at that and say thank you for watching.